VoiceOS isn't just turning speech into text, it's turning speech into actions. This is VoiceOS, a voice operating system and AI voice assistant. The key distinction is simple. Dictation writes words, while VoiceOS acts on requests. VoiceOS presents typing at 1x, dictation at 4x, and VoiceOS at 10x. One interesting idea is that your cursor can provide the context for your request. For example, VoiceOS shows the request, "Can you find his LinkedIn?" The intended workflow is point at context, say what you want, then let VoiceOS act. That means you don't have to explain as much context before making the request. VoiceOS frames its core shift as moving from speech to text to voice to action. The site gives concrete examples: email, meetings, finding PDFs, and taking notes. First, VoiceOS lists sending an email as a voice-triggered action. It also gives replying to Maya as another direct action. Another example is scheduling a meeting through your voice. VoiceOS also lists finding a PDF instead of manually hunting for it. Need to capture something quickly? Taking a note is another listed action. The examples extend beyond work too, including texting mom. For work tasks, VoiceOS also lists filing a bug. Searching the web is another action shown on the VoiceOS site. It can also be asked to open the roadmap. Drafting a proposal appears in the site's action examples too, and the list includes adding a daily note. Taken together, those examples span communication, search, scheduling, and everyday work. Scrolling further down the actual site, VoiceOS expands on these voice-to-action workflows. Here's another example request from the site: search for last year's tax returns. VoiceOS describes a familiar problem. You know the item, but not where it lives. Instead of manually looking around, the proposed workflow is simply to ask VoiceOS. The site's pitch is to replace hunting through files, emails, docs, and notes with asking. VoiceOS specifically calls out files, emails, documents, and notes. The product page says you can ask and have VoiceOS pull it up in seconds. Then there's Agent Mode, illustrated with "Remind me to send Maya the deck." Agent Mode is presented as a way to say a task once and let it go. VoiceOS says it keeps track of the task and brings it back at the right time. The idea is to move task tracking out of your head and into the agent. That's more than transcription because the task can return later when it's relevant. The product page separates Agent Mode from Dictation Mode. Dictation Mode handles the simpler use case, talking instead of typing. Agent Mode is positioned differently. Say what you want done. So one mode replaces typing, while the other is designed around actions. Let's return to VoiceOS's own productivity comparison, starting with typing at 1x. The site places dictation at 4x relative productivity, and VoiceOS itself is presented at 10x in that comparison. Visually, the site's comparison jumps from 1 to 4 to 10. The product's explanation is that dictation accelerates typing, while VoiceOS adds actions. The core product story is voice, request, context, then action. One of the clearest examples is simply asking VoiceOS to send an email. The site also explicitly describes filing a ticket through voice to action. Scheduling a meeting is another concrete example given by VoiceOS. Email, tickets, and meetings show what VoiceOS means by voice to action. The page says VoiceOS performs the requested action in the right app. VoiceOS summarizes this idea as saying it once, then letting the system handle the action. That's why the site insists VoiceOS isn't just another dictation app. In fact, that's exactly how VoiceOS frames the product on its site. The cursor as context idea matters because it reduces how much you need to explain. VoiceOS summarizes that interaction as no more explaining, just point and ask. Point at something on screen, ask about it, and the cursor supplies context. The search example tackles another problem: remembering the thing but not its location. VoiceOS calls out information scattered across files, emails, documents, and notes. Its search pitch separates knowing what you want from knowing where it is. Then Agent Mode adds persistence by keeping track of tasks you mention. Say the Maya deck reminder once, then VoiceOS says it can keep track of it. That's the site's compact description of the Agent Mode experience. VoiceOS also gives privacy a dedicated section on its product page. VoiceOS says audio isn't stored on its servers or used to train models. The site's privacy statement says your audio is never stored on its servers. It also says that your audio is never used to train models. VoiceOS says you decide what information leaves your Mac. The page lists controls for transcripts, cloud audio, and dictation training. The privacy section emphasizes local transcripts and avoiding cloud storage of raw audio. There is also an option to send anonymous diagnostics and crash reports. VoiceOS says those diagnostics never include raw audio or full transcripts tied to you. The privacy model described on the site combines no server audio storage with user-controlled sharing. Near the bottom of the actual page, VoiceOS also presents feedback from its users. Gabe Perez says VoiceOS lets him get work done 10 times faster. The page identifies Gabe Perez as head of product curation at Product Hunt. Andre says VoiceOS was the voice productivity tool he ended up sticking with. The site describes Andre as an AI enthusiast and NVIDIA GTC winner. The testimonial section also includes media artist Yoichi Ochiai. VoiceOS lists Yoichi Ochiai with 605,000 followers. Usutaku says VoiceOS felt faster and offered a better experience than other voice input tools tried. The VoiceOS page labels Usutaku as the #1 Japanese AI influencer. A user named SoLab says feedback led to a feature being added the next day. That testimonial describes feedback, a feature addition, and a next-day turnaround. Albi Chervin says he switched to VoiceOS after using WhisperFlow for 3 days. That testimonial specifically says the switch happened after 3 days with WhisperFlow. Akira highlights another use case: combining coding agents with dictation. The site identifies Akira as Random Labs founder and an agent harness researcher. Emmanuel Perez specifically calls out Agent Mode as a feature he likes. His testimonial says Agent Mode makes tasks like replying to emails much faster. Renee Griunau sums up the experience with a simple message: just speak. His testimonial closes with the line, "The future does not type, she speaks." VoiceOS says founders, creators, and builders are replacing typing with the product. The central contrast is between typing and using spoken requests to trigger actions. For communication, the site lists sending email, replying, and texting. For scheduling, the example is direct: ask VoiceOS to schedule a meeting. For retrieval, VoiceOS focuses on finding information you know exists somewhere. Work examples include filing a bug and opening a roadmap. Writing examples include drafting a proposal and adding a daily note. For reminders, Agent Mode is designed to keep track and bring tasks back later. Those examples reveal 6 broad workflows shown directly on the VoiceOS page. A useful mental model is see the context, point, speak, and trigger the action. The examples include both immediate actions and tasks that Agent Mode keeps track of. The important distinction isn't speaking instead of typing. It's what happens after you speak. With dictation, you get words. VoiceOS is presented as continuing into the requested action. That's why the site's Agent Mode headline is, "Say it, and it gets done." Meanwhile, Dictation Mode gets the simpler promise, talk instead of typing. Those two promises capture the product's distinction between dictation and agent behavior. VoiceOS addresses the data side with explicit statements about audio and training. The 3 key claims are no server audio storage, no model training, and user control. Put it together: point, speak, act, optionally track the task, with privacy controls described on the site. And the product summarizes its productivity pitch with 1x, 4x, and 10x. The takeaway is that VoiceOS is positioning voice as an interface for actions, not only text. If you remember one thing, remember this distinction: voice typing produces text. VoiceOS aims at actions. Voice to action is the phrase that best captures the product's core idea. Subscribe to Resource AI Hub for more AI tools and practical walkthroughs.